You can then take that out and make $1 million off of it. So people it's just too easy to do. And what these people have done and what the organizations have funded and allowed them to do is they've targeted the most at-risk communities that we have throughout this country.
And when it takes one of their family members' lives, it's a wake-up call. All I wanted from that one hit for 7 straight years was to find out where could I get my next hit.
Now, the opioid crisis is killing so many people across the country. Now in the state of Ohio, word is it's running out of room at the morgue, so much so that state officials in Ohio have had to resort to using cold storage trailers for the deceased. Now, according to the Ohio Department of Health, the number of opioid-related deaths skyrocketed from nearly 300 in 2003 to over 2,500 in 2015. That's a 775% jump.
Here's why this matters. More Americans now die every year from drug overdoses than they do in car crashes.
Now we need your support again. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
Hi, I'm Henry Harry, and thank you for taking the time to watch our program. Crime in America is a really big challenge. In this episode, we focus on a particular type of crime, or maybe it's better stated as just a particular type of problem. That problem is the use of illicit drugs and a growing addiction to legally prescribed opioid-based medications. In Sacramento, California, like much of America, we struggle with the fallout from illicit drugs and those obtained from the medical community. Whether it's further complicating the lives of those who are homeless or mentally ill, to the loss of so many lives from overdoses, we are feeling the impact. In Sacramento, 2 men have teamed up to assist each other and a community to help fight the plague of drugs. Bishop Ron Allen is a longtime Sacramento-based minister with a well-established track record of community service. He is the pastor of the Greater Solomon Temple Community Church, the founder of the International Faith-Based Coalition, which unites all denominations of clergy around the fight against drugs. And he works closely with William Ruzzamenti at the Central Valley High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Organization, or the acronym HIDTA. Now we turn to William Ruzzamenti. He is a veteran lawman approaching his 50th year in law enforcement service. He is the director of the Central Valley HIDTA, a position he's held for the past 10 years. With Interstate 5 and Highway 99 as major roadways from the bottom of California on up and into Oregon and beyond, Sacramento and other cities along these highways see more than their fair share of drugs flooding into their communities. With those drugs come increased crime, a lot of violence, murders, and an immeasurable human toll as communities are ravaged in the wake of these drugs. But before we hear the stories of these 2 men, let's view some information to gain a little more context on how the drug crisis is playing out across the U.S.
Perfect.
This week, the U.S. Senate passed a bill to expand state and local programs to fight the nation's opioid drug epidemic. The abuse, primarily of painkillers and heroin, caused almost 29,000 overdose deaths in the U.S. in 2014. The bill, which now goes to the House of Representatives, comes as the risk of opioid abuse among women has soared, and that includes pregnant women whose babies are also at risk.
For the first 10 years of her life, she lived with a mother addicted to heroin. Their history together shows how savage the grip of addiction can be. Today, Tori is a remarkably composed 14-year-old telling her story, her way.
What do you remember about those early years and your mom?
She never ate. She'd have maybe a Coke a day, no water, and then go right back to bed. And she'd never take care of me, never feed me. I had to feed myself. I consider myself as the parent and my mom the kid.
Do you think your mom sold drugs?
Yeah, I know she did.
She got in trouble for that?
Yeah. One time, I think I was around 7 or 8, she actually made me do a drug deal for her.
We want to share a good understanding of what's happening in Sacramento. So we spoke with Scott Anderson. He is an award-winning reporter and author who works for the Sacramento News and Review. He has covered the drug trade and the fallout from drug use for many years. This is his take on the subject.
I think what we've seen in Sacramento County and in the Capital Region the last 6 or 7 years is several things happening at the same time. One thing is a lot of deaths of young people from opioids or the bridge to heroin use from opioids. So I think the reason that has come into the forefront of the media so much recently is because it's simply caused a lot of family tragedies. It's caused a lot of young people to die. I covered 6 fatal overdoses in a month one time in 2015. The youngest person was 17 and the oldest person was 24. So these were very young people. So that's become a huge problem. It is being talked about a lot because it's causing so much pain with families. But at the same time, we have a huge problem with methamphetamine and other stimulants in the area. We know that trafficking of methamphetamine is up this year. It's at a 5-year high, and that's affecting every facet of life in this region, and it's overwhelming every facet of local government. It's causing an increase in child abuse cases, child neglect cases, elder abuse cases. It's causing waves of property crime. It's a driving factor in gang violence, and it's overwhelming the prison system, the county jail system, and the social service system because the addiction drives so much crime. So I think we have 2 different drug epidemics happening simultaneously, and they're both pretty devastating in different ways.
As we know, Sacramento is not immune from the devastation of illegal drugs and the pain of the opioid crisis. Let's turn now and hear Bishop Ron Allen tell his story in this segment titled, Battling the Devil.
And so I was a pastor on crack cocaine. Not just an individual, a pastor on crack cocaine. And I strongly believe that the reason why I stayed addicted so long was because I was embarrassed, I was ashamed. And crack cocaine eased the shame of being a pastor. Isn't that crazy? So here we go in a circle. I'm ashamed because I'm a pastor on crack cocaine. So I got to use crack cocaine because it takes away the pain. My whole life right now is surrounded and shrouded in what can I do to help individuals stay away from drugs? What can I do to help youth to never taste that poison? I was so tired of living, and I tried every single thing that I thought I could try. Through rehab, 30-day rehab, 60-day rehab, 90-day rehab. And when I would come back from the rehab, the first place I would go is to my drug dealer. and I would start back up again. How do you get started? What happens? No one believes they're ever going to get addicted. No one tries to become addicted. And when they become addicted to whatever the drug is, I've never met a drug addict that has said, woohoo, I made it. Woo! I've been trying my best to be a heroin addict. I've been trying my best to be a crack addict. Man, I've been trying to find these cool cigarettes, and look, you know what? I finally made it. I'm smoking a whole pack of cool cigarettes all day. Woohoo! I made it. Every single addict that I have ever met, the language is, one day we'll be free. One day we're going to get off of this, out of this addiction. My addiction started with marijuana, smoking pot. They told me pot wasn't a drug that you wouldn't get addicted by. And I believed the story. And I smoked a lot of pot, and you smoke so much marijuana to where your body becomes acclimated, and so you can't get high from one joint anymore. Then you can't get high from 2 joints, and you can't get high from 5 joints. And all of a sudden you can't get high, and so you use something else within the marijuana. My choice of drug was crack cocaine, and you put the marijuana into the crack cocaine into the marijuana, and that is what is called a Grimmy. And I was introduced to the Grimmy, and the first hit of that Grimmy, I didn't want marijuana anymore. I didn't want my wife, I didn't want my children, I didn't want my job, I didn't want my church. All I wanted from that one hit for 7 straight years was to find out where could I get my next hit. The individual that's addicted never plans to become an addict. We always, all the time, believe it will not happen to me. I'm mentally strong enough, that's not going to happen. My addiction affected my entire family. 7 years of crack cocaine. Affected my wife, my children, my job. When you become addicted to whatever drug you choose, you're not the only one that suffers. Your entire family suffers. Your entire neighborhood suffers, because if you can't get the money from your family, you'll rob, steal, and even kill individuals in and out your neighborhood. There's always some reason why an individual is on a drug. And in the 6th year of I wanted to die. I thought about suicide. I thought of many things, and I asked God to kill me, let me have my funeral. Wanted to die. I really did, because I knew then I felt that I tried everything.
He fits the mold. William Ruzzamenti fits the mold of a hard-nosed cop. You know, that guy you read about in a crime novel. The guy whose dogged tenacity wins out at the end of a very long day. Let's hear how this veteran crime fighter shares his story under the title, The Cop and the Fight.
Drug dealers, to me, are like leeches. And, you know, if you see them swimming around, they don't look bad, but once they get attached to you, they're hard to get off, and they suck your blood out. And what these people have done, and what the organizations have funded and allowed them to do, is they've targeted the most at-risk communities that we have throughout this country. The dynamic of drug trafficking has really changed from some little criminal groups to massive drug organizations, and that has been quite terrifying. Then when the Colombians came along and really discovered the economics of scale with drugs and started doing them in the massive fashion that they did, that sort of led to a whole change in the whole dynamic of drug trafficking and drug organizations. You had organizations now that were not $1 million organizations, but billion and multi-billion dollar organizations that the leaders of whom were on the Forbes 500 most richest people in the world. And they started doing business with some of the little criminal organizations in Mexico, and then they all of a sudden became Forbes 500 richest people. They control the market, they set the markets up, they put things in motion. Whether or not you have a drug problem, they will create a drug problem for you because they need more people to use their dope. Anytime you feel you have a calling, which law enforcement to me, I've always felt it was a calling. It was a mission that I had to get into. As a kid, I was always the smallest kid in my class. I got bullied a lot, so I learned not to like bullies. Fortunately for me, my father and two of my uncles had been professional boxers, and so they taught me to defend myself literally at 5 years old. They put the gloves on me and my cousins, and we would go at it with each other and literally beat the crap out of each other every time we would have a holiday. At Christmas, the wives would all be up in arms because the kids were out beating each other up with boxing gloves in a boxing ring. But it taught me to defend myself and be confident. I started with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I originally, before I got into drug enforcement, I was a U.S. Air Marshal back in 1970 when they were first hijacking planes to Cuba. I was going to law school at the time, and that looked like something interesting that I might want to get into, so I started doing that. Then I became a U.S. Customs agent, and then eventually those of us that were working drug enforcement and customs combined to make what was DEA in 1973 from a presidential reorganization. And then I became a special agent with DEA. I was one of the first 500, and then I was with DEA until 1999 when I retired and became the director of the Central Valley HIDTA. I went to law school for a period of time, and I went to work at the Children's Receiving Home here in Sacramento while I was going to law school. And I always thought I wanted to be an attorney, and that might be the direction I would go. But then while I was going to law school, and I saw the kids that came into the Children's Receiving Home, and the vast majority were there not for anything they did wrong, but because their parents either did something to them or couldn't take care of them. And so many of those cases involved the abuse of drugs. And to see the impact that had on these little kids, and it was just horrific to see that. I can remember one little girl, she was 3 years old, and she was deaf because her parents had literally smacked her alongside of the head so many times that she became deaf. And I actually went home several times and tried to get my wife to agree to adopt this child because I felt so bad for her. And she was in an environment where you know, is a transient one at best, and these kids are passing through, and she couldn't communicate with anybody, and so that broke my heart. And then eventually a kid got there who was also deaf, and it was just wonderful to see them interact. And she was taken into a foster home, and she got care. But again, her parents were abusers of methamphetamine way before methamphetamine was even a cultural thing, and they would get in fights with each other and end up, she would get between them and they would just smack her around. And so that got me thinking that maybe I didn't want to be an attorney and I didn't want to be defending these people, that maybe these people should be brought to justice, and maybe that would help these terrible things from happening. And so that got me thinking that I wanted to go the law enforcement direction as opposed to being an attorney and defending folks. And so from that point on, I was committed to do that.
Every day, Americans are dealing with some kind of impact from our drug crisis. It's all around us, with people high and acting out in public, or our first responders and emergency rooms are being overwhelmed with calls for service. So I put a broad question to Bishop Allen and Director Ruzzamenti. What are some of the factors driving the drug problems on our streets?
Fentanyl is turning out to be one of the worst things that's ever been invented. It has a place in medicine, it has a place in pain control, but fentanyl is now being manufactured by the ton in China. And you can go on the internet and you can order a pound of fentanyl. I can show you how to do it for as little as $2,000. That fentanyl then is shipped to the United States, to your house, primarily through U.S. Post Office, shipped to your house. You can then take that out and make $1 million off of it. So people it's just too easy to do. Now the U.S. is recently engaged in conversations with China where they're going to restrict the manufacture and the shipping of fentanyl. But we don't do this until thousands of people die. And that's a thing that just befuddles me, is that we always wait for people to die, and not just a person or two, tens of thousands. We had more people dying of opiate overdoses last year than died in the entire Vietnam War.
What's driving the opioid addiction? We know that when the laws have changed, that hospital or doctors could not prescribe opioids the way they used to. And now there's a system put in place that wasn't in place before. The system that is put in place is now doctors can see every patient of the next doctor who's giving opioids. That didn't happen some years ago. In other words, a person could go from one doctor to the next, and to the next to the next, and get all these opioid pills. Well, there's a law now put in place by through legislation that says that the doctors have to share that information. And so the pills that an individual could get, the opioid pills, are not there anymore. And so they went to the streets, to heroin. And so what's driving, really driving the opioid or the heroin addiction is that it is not as prevalent, or it's not there for those that are still suffering from the addiction. They can't get that prescription anymore from the doctors. So they've gone to the street, and we have an explosion of deaths from heroin.
As our country copes with this huge opioid addiction problem, a lot of blame has been placed on big pharmaceutical companies. In fact, some public entities have actually sued these companies for damages done to their communities. I wanted Bishop Allen and Director Ruzzamenti's take on this issue.
Drugs have always been about making money. And so why wouldn't Big Pharma get involved in pushing pills? trying to make money through the doctors. This is the reason why the law has been changed, so that the doctors would not adhere to Big Pharma. But because of the money that's available, I think we have a very serious problem, and I think that law enforcement should pay close attention to Big Pharma.
Well, having spent many years, 29 years with DEA, I know how the pharmaceutical business works. And I'm in a way conflicted with this because I think pain medication is absolutely necessary and has more good than bad that's been done from it. The problem has been that doctors, primarily, pharmaceutical companies do not sell painkillers to the community at large. Doctors prescribe them and then they are distributed to the communities. So I think the medical community at large was lax for many years, and if you came in and said, my shoulder hurts, would prescribe you a pain medication, and in many cases an opiate-based pain medication. And so people started taking them, and if you needed more, they would prescribe you more without the thought process of, if you take certain opiate-based medications, and depending on your personality, but depending on your ability to intake and ingest drugs, you can be addicted to an opiate in as little as 2 or 3 days. And we know that now. Hypothetically, we didn't know that a few years ago. So they just kept getting more and more. And I think the entire process was really at fault. But the medical community needs to take responsibility for that and not blame it all on the big pharma. Because big pharma, they're making it, and they can't sell it unless you prescribe it. And that's what was happening. And we have so many pill mills. I mean, there's a place in West Virginia that has 1,500 people, but was distributing millions of pain pills a year. A town of 1,500 people. I mean, they were distributing 15,000 pills per everybody in the town per year. Now, that doesn't mean all those people in that town were getting those pills, but when you have a location like that where those things are going on, it's going to draw people, and they go there because they know the ease in which they can get the medication that they want to use, buy, or sell.
Unfortunately, we have to close out this half-hour portion of our show so it conforms to television viewing requirements. But there's additional interviews linked to Bishop Ron Allen's Facebook page. It's heartbreaking to look across our cities and see so many caught in the misery of drug addiction. They are truly suffering, and they are bringing our cities down in the process. We must deal with this drug abuse crisis. We hope you gain a better understanding of the drug crisis facing America, and will work to end its devastating impacts. Thanks for watching.